Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update. And in today's video, we're going to dive into a little bit of some fall forecast research. Our webinar is now a little under 3 weeks away for the official unveiling of our fall forecast and our preliminary winter idea. And so stay tuned for that if you haven't signed up for it yet. bamwx.com/webinar. Of course, as normal, free to sign up for that. I would highly encourage you to do that, as we will dive into the details of fall, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we work later into the video today. But before we get to that, we do have some rain and storm chances that I want to talk about across the north central part of the country. Some slow moving, kind of back building storms here across parts of Iowa and northern Missouri. Guys, these have been kind of lingering across this region throughout much of the morning. It has prompted flash flood warnings for part of this region, as well as Iowa just continued to be a hot spot for heavy rainfall as we have gone throughout this summer. We zoom back out, you can see a couple of stronger storms out in parts of Montana. These will be working east as we work throughout the day. And if we take a look at the severe weather threat, we've got a multi-day severe weather threat across the north central part of the country. An enhanced risk of severe weather today, that is a 3 on a scale of 5. Today, both very large hail and damaging winds will be a threat. The hatched area here that you can see is where we could see significantly large hail, maybe 2 inches plus in diameter. If we take a look at the wind threat, the hatched area is where we could see some significant wind damage with the strongest storms. And I also would not be shocked to see a couple of tornadoes in here, especially across this brown shaded area. That's going to include areas like Bismarck, Dickinson, and Minot today. And then as we work into tomorrow, the threat will continue, but it will shift a little bit further to the east. Extreme amounts of instability tomorrow will lead to primarily a very large hail threat, but also some damaging wind gusts being possible across this region tomorrow, especially up towards the Fargo and the Grand Forks area. Taking a look here at the temperatures, this is something that I want to continue to hone in on, specifically with the overnight lows, because I think it's becoming more and more of a story. It's starting to become talked about even a little bit more. We've been talking about this for several weeks, if not months at this point, in terms of the humidity levels and the moisture that's been in the atmosphere, keeping the low temperatures very elevated. And if we take a look tonight, you can see upper 70s across the southern plains, low to mid 70s across the Midwest. So we work into Saturday morning, guys. You can see here record-breaking warm lows likely across parts of the upper Midwest, not getting out of the mid 70s for parts of Iowa, Missouri, Illinois. And as we continue to work throughout this time frame, you can see areas in the eastern ag belt pretty consistently dealing with low to mid 70s for those low temperatures, meaning that those, again, overnight lows going to stay abnormally elevated. And if we take a look at where we've been since the middle part of June, if you recall, June started slightly on a cooler note, but if you look at where we've been ever since mid-June, eastern portions of the Ag Belt, parts of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, top 5 warmest on record for those overnight lows. In fact, a couple of areas, couple of districts in central Indiana, eastern Ohio, guys, warmest on record in terms of those overnight lows since June 15th. And so just been a very, very mild pattern. Hasn't been extreme in terms of those high temperatures, but the lows have been very consistently elevated. And that should continue over the next 2 weeks, because if we look at the forecast, guys, we're going to continue to average out warmer than normal in really those areas that we just talked about, especially the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and into the Northeast. I would say the week 1 and the week 2 pattern here, guys, very similar as a whole. Would watch out for some cooler trends maybe across the far northwest plains and the Mountain West, but all things considered, we're pretty well locked into this pattern the next 2 weeks. When there are fronts, when there are storm systems, they'll have the tendency to kind of move here across the north central part of the country. That will lead to precipitation chances across the Midwest. You can see here in the short term, next 7 days, primary rainfall chances across the northern plains and the upper Midwest, messier chances in the far western plains and the Ohio Valley, and we'll see more of that here as we go throughout the week 2 timeframe. In fact, a very similar pattern, all things considered, likely as we go into this week 2 period for precipitation. The further west you are, the drier it will be across the southwest plains, with messier rain chances likely across the Ohio Valley. And so a pretty persistent pattern that we're dealing with here over the next couple of weeks. You take a look at the upper level pattern, you can kind of see why. Now, here's the 10 to 15 day forecast where we get some of this northwest flow and where some of these systems and waves move through right kind of in this region in here. And then you will get messy storm chances at times in the Ohio Valley, but it's not necessarily as widespread, not as persistent as areas further to the north. So, most of those areas in the Ohio Valley have been able to cash in on rains as we've gone throughout this summer, but would not be shocked if there are a couple of spots here and there the next few weeks that start to dry out a bit with a hotter pattern and maybe not as widespread of rainfall opportunities, at the very least more sporadic in nature. Now, in terms of the driver behind this pattern, we talked about how moving more so into MJO Phase 3 would allow for the warmth to stick around. Phase 2 would open up the door for some cooler shots of air. Phase 3 here, guys, tends to favor more warmth. And if we take a look at that here since 2000, you can see that when we combine it with our weaker than normal or La Nina-like global winds, it favors the widespread above normal temperatures. I would argue that this likely verifies a little bit further south and east, as things have pretty much all of this summer. In terms of moisture, you can kind of see the messy nature of things. It puts a corridor here in the Midwest, but it's more hit or miss across Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. You could also see something that we'll need to continue to watch down the road: tropical activity. These phases tend to favor increases in tropical threats. That is something we're keeping a very close eye on. The latest trends as we work into the third week of August have shifted the higher threat a little bit further to the east. Just goes to show, as we talked about on Tuesday, nothing is set in stone yet. We're just monitoring trends for potential impacts down the road. So no specifics on exact track or intensity, but in terms of current data, the indications would be East Coast to the open ocean and the Atlantic for the highest threat. We do need to still keep an eye on the Gulf, but the trend has been at least a little bit further east over the past couple of runs. Certainly need to keep an eye on this as we get a little bit closer, but again, no specifics quite yet. Now, getting into the fall forecast, September, October, and November. This is something that I want to bring up here, looking at the North Pacific Ocean. Number one, starting to see some weaker La Nina conditions maybe trying to reappear here in the Central Pacific. That will be a bigger influence down the road. But I think this is potentially a big influence heading into the fall months, and that is our Pacific Decadal Oscillation, or what we call the PDO. Specifically here, we're looking at this warm horseshoe of water extending east of Korea and Japan out into the central and the north central parts of the Pacific. When you get a big warm pool like this with cooler waters kind of extending off of the southwest coast of North America, this is what we call a negative PDO. It impacts our jet stream, it impacts how much moisture our jet streams pick up, where they're placed, and overall our pattern in the United States. The latest value in July was the lowest on record, and these records go back to the 1850s. And so this is the lowest value in terms of the negative PDO in recorded history at -4 standard deviations this month. What will that mean for our upcoming season? If we take a look here at the lowest years in the last 30 years or so, you can see that it tends to favor more widespread above normal temperatures persisting as we go throughout the fall, perhaps especially across the central part of the country. It also tends to favor a drier risk with the forecast. As we get into the fall months and our jet streams naturally shift a little bit further to the south, with that cooler air off the west coast of North America, maybe not as able to pick up moisture opportunities and favors a dry risk overall, maybe some moisture kind of up the east coast. Now, that's not the be-all, end-all of the forecast. There are a couple of other drivers that we need to consider, but even with that, these resemble our fall outlook pretty well. In fact, if you compare here, maybe we're not quite as widespread with the much above normal temperatures, and we'll talk about why here in a moment, but the orientation very similar overall with a general mild harvest season. terms of moisture, we are a little bit more active across the eastern ag belt. I still think that some of the Bermuda High influence from our strong negative AMO state can allow for some moisture coming up through here as we work into the fall season, but maybe not quite as active across the plains. So drying out a little bit across the plains compared to where we've been this summer. Taking a look at our top analogs right now, you can see that overall favors the idea. 24, 21, 11, 10, and 18 are the best matches as things stand right now. Favors the mild fall overall. If anything, there could be the tendency for this ridge to come a little bit further to the east, which would shift precipitation west as well. That will need to be kept an eye on. That's been the theme all summer long. And you can kind of see the tendency here with the moisture. I think the risk to our current fall outlook is that we've got the wetter conditions in here. How dry does it really get in the central part of the country? We kind of have these conflicting drivers between the Pacific and the Atlantic. Right now, leaning slightly drier than normal, but again, if we go back to this analog, we don't have the much below normal precip here in the plains because of this type of a signal. So trying to blend the ideas the best that we can. In terms of the month of September, as we get into next month, if we're going to make any changes, I think right now the change would be rather than a more widespread, much above normal area, we may need to consolidate two separate areas in the southwestern United States and then in the northeastern part of the country. Here, with the risk pending tropical activity of maybe a couple of cold fronts in the middle of the country. But again, the overall theme here is warmer than normal. And if you look at where we've been summer to date, it's pretty darn similar to how things have verified over the past 2 to 3 months heading into September. We'll have a new update and official map on the Clarity platform within the next week or so for the month of September. Until then, guys, hope you all have a great rest of your day.